Angela stood in the grand, shimmering ballroom, feeling completely out of place in the simple blue dress she'd sewn herself. Her husband, Derek, with his slicked-back hair and arrogant smile, paraded her in front of his business clients. Then, he did the unthinkable. He pointed at her and mocked her appearance, her weight, her homemade dress. Laughter erupted, echoing around her, each chuckle a tiny dagger to her heart. Angela felt a hot flush of humiliation, but held her head high. She had to. But what Derek, in his cruel arrogance, didn't know was that someone else was watching. In the back of the room, far from the jeering crowd, sat the billionaire, Samuel Crane. He wasn't laughing. He saw everything. He saw the pain in Angela's eyes and the quiet strength she used to endure it. This powerful man's silent observation was about to change the course of her life forever. You see, this wasn't just about a dress. This was about years of sacrifice. Angela had given up her dreams, her nursing career, and even part of her own liver to save Derek's ungrateful mother. She had put her health on the line, gaining weight from the stress and emotional turmoil, all while Derek climbed the social ladder, using her as a stepping stone. Sometimes when we feel most alone, when we think no one sees our struggle, there's a witness in the wings. This is the incredible story of how one woman's moment of absolute darkness sparked a miracle so powerful, it would leave everyone utterly speechless. What happens next will not only restore your faith in justice, but will also prove that true worth is never measured by what's on the outside, but by the undeniable beauty of the soul within. The Golden Ballroom was a sea of crystal lights and clinking wine glasses. The air buzzed with the confident chatter of successful men in expensive suits. In the midst of all this splendor, Angela walked beside Derek, her hands trembling as she clutched her small purse. The blue dress, sewn with her own hands, felt like a whisper in a room full of shouts. She could feel the stares, hear the whispers, and sense the judgment. But she kept her chin up, fighting the wave of embarrassment threatening to pull her under. Derek, looking flawless in his tailored black suit, flashed a brilliant smile at his colleagues. His ambition was a tangible thing, a hunger in his eyes to impress at any cost. Angela recognized that look. It was the same one he wore whenever he was about to lie. "My wife," Derek announced, his voice booming artificially across the room, "always surprises me with her handmade creations." A wave of snickering followed. Angela felt her face burn, but she forced a smile. It was a survival mechanism she'd perfected over the years, burying the hurt so deep no one could see it. "At least someone in the family has manual talent," he added, eliciting another round of cruel laughter. But at the back of the opulent room, a distinguished man with silver-gray hair watched in complete silence. Samuel Crane, the notoriously private billionaire, wasn't laughing. His piercing blue eyes were fixed on Angela, and his expression was one of deep seriousness, a stark contrast to the mockery swirling around him. Angela lowered her gaze, pretending to admire the intricate pattern of the marble floor. Every word from Derek was another twist of the knife. She had given up so much for this man. Her dreams, her career as a nurse, her own well-being, her dignity. "Honey, tell them about your cooking adventures," Derek said, his voice dripping with a false sweetness that made Angela's stomach clench. No one in that room could have possibly imagined that this quiet, humiliated woman was about to become the centerpiece of a miracle that would forever alter every single one of their lives. Angela burst through the hotel's revolving glass doors, her breath catching in her throat as she fought back a storm of tears. The cool night air hit her face, but did little to extinguish the burning shame that consumed her. In the dimly lit parking lot, she fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Her old sedan looked even more out of place under the harsh streetlights, its faded paint a painful symbol of how their lives had stalled while Derek chased his grandiose ambitions. She slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. A weak, pathetic click was the only response. The engine was dead. "Please, not tonight," she whispered, her voice cracking as the first tear finally broke free and traced a path down her cheek. Across the parking lot, Samuel Crane watched from the tinted windows of his limousine. He had slipped out of the event, unable to witness another moment of Derek's sickening performance. There was something about Angela's quiet grace in the face of such public humiliation that had stirred something deep within him, memories he thought were long buried. "Should we approach, sir?" his driver asked, his voice a respectful murmur. Samuel simply shook his head, his eyes fixed on Angela as she tried the ignition again and again. With each failed attempt, her shoulders slumped a little more, shaking with silent, heartbreaking sobs. Back inside, Derek's laughter echoed through the ballroom. He was holding court, regaling his colleagues with grand stories of deals he was about to close. He hadn't even noticed his wife was gone, too drunk on the attention and the empty promises of success. Angela finally gave up, resting her forehead against the cold steering wheel. 20 years. 20 years of marriage had led to this, being publicly shamed while her husband charmed people who would forget his name by sunrise. Samuel made a quiet gesture to his driver. "Follow her home," he said softly. "But keep your distance. I want to understand who this woman really is." In that moment, the billionaire made a silent vow. He would uncover the story behind the woman with the sad eyes and the unbreakable spirit. Angela's old car eventually sputtered to life and pulled into the narrow driveway of a modest house in a quiet, working-class neighborhood. The paint on the house was peeling and the front yard was overgrown, but it was her sanctuary. She sat in the car for a long moment, gathering the strength to face the empty rooms inside. The sleek limousine parked discreetly across the street. Samuel watched as Angela finally got out and walked slowly toward her front door. Even exhausted and heartbroken, she moved with a certain grace, a dignity that cruel words couldn't tarnish. Inside her small, simple kitchen, Angela wiped the last tears from her eyes and immediately started pulling out pots and pans. Despite the crushing events of the evening, she hadn't forgotten her purpose. She couldn't forget about Mrs. Rodriguez next door, who was recovering from surgery, or Mr. Thompson across the street, a widower with no family to look after him. She began to ladle steaming, fragrant soup into containers, adding slices of fresh bread she had baked that very morning. This simple act of caring for others was like a balm to her wounded spirit, slowly mending the cuts left by Derek's vicious words. From his car, Samuel watched in utter amazement as Angela emerged from her house carrying the food containers. She crossed the street and knocked gently on her neighbors' doors. Her face, which had been etched with pain just moments before, now lit up with a genuine, radiant warmth as the elderly neighbors welcomed her inside. Even after being torn down in public, her first instinct was to lift others up. His driver quietly turned the radio to a gospel station, and a soulful song about forgiveness and faith filled the quiet car. Samuel felt a powerful stirring in his chest. It was a recognition of true, profound value, the kind that had absolutely nothing to do with money, power, or social status. "Find out everything about her," he instructed his driver, his voice low but firm. "Her background, her story, everything. But be discreet." Through the limousine window, he watched as Angela helped an elderly man carry his groceries inside, her own pain seemingly forgotten in the act of pure, selfless kindness. This wasn't a performance. This wasn't charity for show. This was the essence of who she was. And Samuel Crane was about to discover something about Angela that would make him question everything he thought he knew about wealth, beauty, and the true measure of a human being. 3 days later, a thick manila folder landed on Samuel Crane's desk. In the quiet of his penthouse office, he expected a routine background check. What he found left him utterly speechless. Angela Martinez had been a registered nurse for 15 years before marrying Derek. The file was filled with glowing recommendations, patient testimonials, and awards for exceptional care. She had abandoned her career when Derek's law practice struggled and his mother fell gravely ill. Samuel's hands trembled as he read on. Medical records revealed Angela had donated part of her liver to save Derek's mother. The surgery was risky, demanding months of recovery, leaving Angela unable to work and putting them under devastating financial strain. The most heartbreaking detail was a handwritten note from Angela's old supervisor. She never returned to nursing. Her husband insisted she focus on supporting his career instead. Samuel set the papers down, staring out at the city skyline. The woman ridiculed for her appearance, for her simple dress had literally given a piece of herself to save another. And Derek's mother, the very woman whose life Angela had saved, had never once acknowledged the sacrifice. His mind drifted to his own mother, Maria, who cleaned offices at night to fund his education. How many times had powerful men looked right through her, treating her as invisible? How often had he, in his own climb to success, forgotten the people who sacrificed for him? The irony was crushing. Derek's mother had fully recovered and lived comfortably, yet she joined her son in treating Angela with disdain, criticizing her cooking, her appearance, her inability to have children. A forgotten memory awakened in Samuel, of his own mother being humiliated for her simplicity. It felt like destiny was offering him a chance to right old wrongs. Derek slammed his briefcase on the kitchen table, his face flushed with rage. The Morrison Industries contract, the deal he'd bragged about, had slipped through his fingers. His arrogance had cost him everything. "Where were you when I needed support?" he shouted at Angela, who was quietly folding laundry. "You embarrassed me at that dinner with your pathetic appearance." Angela looked up, 2 decades of pain reflected in her eyes. "I was there, Derek. I've always been there." "There? You call that being there?" His voice dripped with cruelty. "You looked like you came from a thrift store. Do you know how that made me look?" The words struck Angela like physical blows. She had sewn that dress with such hope, choosing the blue fabric because he once said it brought out her eyes. Now, even that memory was poisoned. "I gave up everything for you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My career, my health, my dreams. I donated part of my liver to save your mother, and she still treats me like I'm nothing." Derek's laugh was cold and heartless. "That's ancient history. What have you done for me lately besides drag me down?" Something inside Angela finally shattered. She stood up slowly, her posture radiating a newfound dignity. "I'm done, Derek. I'm done pretending this cruelty is love." She walked to their bedroom and pulled out an old suitcase. Inside went a few clothes, her long-hidden nursing certificates, and a simple gold necklace from her late mother. Derek followed, his anger turning to panic. "You can't leave. Where will you go? Who would want you?" Angela turned to him one last time. "Someone who sees my worth, not my weight. Someone who values sacrifice, not status." And with that she walked out, never looking back. Derek stood alone in the empty house, surrounded by his expensive suits and law books, feeling a profound loneliness he had never known. Across the street, Samuel's driver watched Angela load her car. Within minutes, a discreet sedan began following her, ensuring her safety. Samuel had seen this coming. The man who had despised her was about to watch the world fall at her feet. 2 weeks later, Angela sat in a small, barely affordable apartment, staring at rejection letters. A 15-year gap in her employment made finding a nursing position nearly impossible, despite her stellar credentials. Just as despair set in, the phone rang. A warm voice introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen, director of the New Hope Community Clinic. "We received your resume through our community outreach program," Dr. Chen explained. "We're looking for experienced nurses who understand our community's needs. Are you interested in an interview?" Angela's heart pounded. She hadn't applied to any outreach program, but it felt like a miracle. The clinic was in her old neighborhood, beautifully modern and filled with a compassionate atmosphere. Dr. Chen was immediately impressed. "Your experience shows genuine care, not just medical competence. That's exactly what we need." Angela started the following Monday, feeling truly alive for the first time in years. Her days were filled with purpose, caring for the elderly, helping new mothers, and comforting those in need. The staff quickly recognized her exceptional skills. Her ability to calm frightened children and her patience with difficult cases made her invaluable. What Angela did not know was that Samuel Crane was observing her progress through discreet security cameras and regular reports from Dr. Chen, who was unaware of her benefactor's personal interest. Samuel watched as Angela transformed from a broken woman into a confident leader. She organized vaccination drives, coordinated with social services, and mentored younger nurses. One evening, Samuel smiled as he read about her latest initiative, a support group for caregivers who had sacrificed their own health for family. She understood their pain intimately. Meanwhile, Derek's world was crumbling. His law practice was failing, creditors were calling, and his mother's medical bills were piling up again. His arrogance had driven away clients, and his cruelty had cost him the only person who ever truly supported him. One day, he drove past the Hope Community Clinic, drowning in self-pity, completely unaware that inside, his ex-wife was saving lives. The irony was lost on him. Samuel felt a deep satisfaction watching Angela flourish. The woman who had been mocked and dismissed was proving to be one of the most valuable people he had ever known. But the past was about to come knocking again, and this time, the price of arrogance would be far too high for Derek to pay. Derek Martinez's chest tightened as he climbed the stairs to his empty house. At 45, the stress of mounting debts, failed relationships, and professional humiliation was taking its toll. He gripped the handrail, gasping for breath as a sharp, agonizing pain radiated down his left arm. The heart attack hit him like a freight train. It was his neighbors who found him, 3 hours later, collapsed in his own driveway. His expensive suit was wrinkled, stained with dirt. The ambulance rushed him not to a prestigious private hospital, but to the nearest facility that would accept his nearly maxed-out insurance. The Hope Community Clinic, his emergency unit. Inside, Dr. Chen worked frantically to stabilize him. Nurses bustled around, preparing the cardiac care room. "We need our best cardiac nurse on this case," Dr. Chen called out over the chaos. "Get me Angela Martinez." Angela was just finishing her shift when the urgent call came. She hurried towards the emergency bay, her mind already focused on the familiar rhythm of saving another life. But as she pushed through the double doors and her eyes landed on the unconscious man on the gurney, her world stopped spinning. It couldn't be. Derek. The man who had mocked her for her weight, who had blamed her for his own failings, who had carelessly thrown away 20 years of their marriage, now lay before her, vulnerable and fighting for his life. His face was pale, his breathing labored. For a fleeting, painful moment, all she could see was the ambitious young law student she had fallen desperately in love with all those years ago. "Angela, are you all right?" Dr. Chen's voice cut through the haze, noticing her frozen expression. Angela shook herself, pulling the professional mask back into place. "Yes, I'm fine," she said, her voice steady. "What's his condition?" "Massive heart attack," Dr. Chen explained quickly. "He's stable for now, but the next 24 hours are critical. His insurance coverage is limited, so we'll need to provide the best care we can within our community program." Angela nodded, her years of training taking over her fractured emotions. "I'll take care of him personally." For the next 18 hours, Angela was a ghost at Derek's side. She monitored his every breath, adjusted his medications, and checked his vital signs with unwavering focus. She made sure he was comfortable, all while he remained unconscious, completely unaware that the woman he had driven away with his cruelty was now the only thing standing between him and death. Her colleagues whispered in the hallways, puzzled by Angela's intense, almost obsessive dedication to this particular patient. They didn't know the history. They didn't see the years of pain, the countless sacrifices that tied this nurse to her patient in a web of shared history. As Derek's condition slowly, miraculously, began to improve, Angela would sit by his bedside during her short breaks. She found herself looking at his hands, the same hands that had once held hers with such tenderness before pride and ambition had poisoned his heart and twisted him into a man she no longer recognized. She could have requested a different assignment. She could have walked away and let another nurse handle his care. No one would have blamed her. But something deeper than anger or hurt guided her actions. She could almost hear her mother's voice echoing in her memory, a gentle mantra from her childhood. "Baby, when someone is broken, that's when they need love the most." Near dawn on the second day, Derek's eyes fluttered open. He was confused, disoriented, the sterile white room swimming in and out of focus. He tried to focus on the figure sitting beside his bed. As recognition finally dawned, his face cycled through a series of emotions, shock, then profound shame, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. "Angela?" he whispered, his voice a dry, barely audible rasp. She leaned forward, her expression calm, her professional mask firmly in place. "Don't try to talk yet," she said softly. You've had a serious heart attack. Just rest." While the woman he had humiliated fought for his life, a watchful eye behind the door was about to reveal the whole truth. After 3 days of intensive, round-the-clock care, Angela finally stepped out of Derek's room, feeling emotionally and physically drained. The hospital hallway was quiet in the early morning hours, and she leaned against the cool wall, finally allowing herself to feel the immense weight of the situation. "Nurse Martinez," a calm voice said. She turned to see a distinguished, older man in an expensive but understated suit. His silver hair was perfectly styled, but his eyes held a warmth that seemed strangely familiar, even though she was certain they had never met. "I'm Samuel Crane," he said softly. "I'd like to speak with you if you have a moment." Angela's eyes widened. Everyone in the city knew that name. Samuel Crane was the billionaire philanthropist whose generous donations had transformed countless lives and institutions. "Mr. Crane," she stammered, What can I do for you?" "Actually," Samuel replied with a small smile, "it's about what you've already done. Could we perhaps talk privately? Maybe in Dr. Chen's office?" Confused but deeply curious, Angela led him to the small, unoccupied office. Samuel closed the door gently behind them and turned to face her, his expression now serious, yet incredibly kind. "I need to tell you something that might be difficult to believe," he began, his voice low and steady. "This clinic, the Hope Community Clinic, was built specifically for you." Angela just stared at him, her mind struggling to make sense of his words. "I don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "We've never met before." "No, we haven't," Samuel confirmed, "but I have been watching you. I was at that dinner party 6 months ago." The dinner party. The memory hit her with the force of a physical blow. The night Derek had publicly humiliated her in front of his colleagues, mocking her weight and her simple profession. "I saw what your husband did to you," Samuel continued, his voice laced with empathy. "I saw how he belittled you in front of everyone, and I followed you home that night. I needed to see what would happen, and I witnessed something truly extraordinary." Angela's mind reeled. You followed me? I saw you, fresh from that humiliation, stop to care for your elderly neighbors," he said. "I saw you check on them, bring them food, tend to them with such kindness despite your own profound pain. It was remarkable. So I had you investigated, not maliciously, I assure you, but because I needed to understand who you truly were." Samuel's voice grew thick with emotion. "I learned about your life, about how you gave up a promising scholarship to care for your sick mother-in-law, about your selfless nursing career, about everything you sacrificed for a man who, forgive me, never deserved you for a single moment." Tears began to trace paths down Angela's cheeks, silent at first, then turning into quiet sobs. "But why?" she whispered. "Why would you, a stranger, care so much about any of that?" Samuel walked to the window, gazing out at the humble neighborhood where Angela had grown up, the same neighborhood the clinic now served. "Because I once had a mother very much like you," he said, his voice distant with memory. "She worked multiple jobs to put me through school. She endured ridicule for being simple and uneducated. She gave me everything. And she died before I ever had the chance to properly thank her, to repay her for her endless sacrifices." He turned back to face Angela, his own blue eyes glistening with unshed tears. "When I saw you that night, Angela, it was like seeing my mother all over again. I felt like the universe was giving me a second chance, a chance to honor the kind of person she was, the kind of person you are." Angela was sobbing openly now, overwhelmed. "I still don't understand why anyone would do so much for me. Build a whole clinic." Samuel approached her gently, his expression full of a deep, paternal respect. He spoke the words that would change her entire world. "Because true value isn't measured by the body, or by wealth, or by status. It's measured by the soul. And you, Angela Martinez, have the most beautiful soul I have ever encountered." Through the office window, they could just see the light on in Derek's room. He lay there recovering, completely oblivious to the fact that his former wife, the woman he had discarded, was about to receive a recognition so profound it would transform not just her life, but the lives of everyone who had ever wronged her. Angela covered her face with her hands, the magnitude of Samuel's gesture washing over her in waves. For so many years, she had felt invisible, worthless, a forgotten footnote in someone else's story. And now, she was discovering that someone had been watching all along. Someone had been caring. Someone had been preparing a miracle she never could have imagined. But destiny, she would soon find, still held one final, incredible gesture. The kind of true redemption that no amount of money could ever buy. 6 months had passed since Derek's heart attack. He sat alone in his small, grim apartment, a mere shadow of the man he once was. His prestigious law practice had completely collapsed, his grand house had been foreclosed on, and his pride, well, that was in ruins. The man who once scoffed at others for their circumstances now found himself drowning in unpaid bills, struggling just to make rent. The television droned on in the background, a meaningless noise until a few words cut through the haze. The grand opening of the most ambitious healthcare project our city has ever seen. Derek's gaze lifted from the pile of red stamped envelopes on his coffee table. On the screen, news anchors were excitedly discussing a massive new medical facility. The camera panned across a stunning modern building, its architecture sleek and impressive, with state-of-the-art equipment visible through vast floor-to-ceiling windows. Billionaire philanthropist Samuel Crane has invested over $50 million in this revolutionary healthcare center that will serve underserved communities. Derek's attention snapped into sharp focus when he saw Samuel Crane on screen. It was the same man from that fateful dinner party months ago, the silent, unassuming guest he'd barely even noticed. The most remarkable aspect of this story, the reporter continued, her voice filled with admiration, is that Mr. Crane has chosen to name the facility after the woman who will serve as its director, a nurse whose unwavering dedication to caring for others inspired this entire project. Derek's blood ran cold. The camera then zoomed in on the building's main entrance. In gleaming golden letters across the modern facade, it spelled out, Angela's Hope Center. No, he whispered, his heart beginning to pound in his chest. That can't be. But there she was, Angela. Walking out of the building's main doors, she was wearing a professional tailored navy suit. Her hair was styled elegantly, and she radiated a confidence and purpose that was completely new. She looked transformed, not physically, but spiritually. There was a light in her eyes, a brilliance that Derek had spent years trying to dim, trying to extinguish. The live broadcast showed hundreds of people gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The crowd was a mix of community leaders, medical professionals, and grateful patients, all buzzing with excitement. Angela stood at a podium adorned with flowers, right beside Samuel Crane. This facility exists because of one woman's extraordinary heart, Samuel announced, his voice carrying over the crowd. Angela Martinez has shown us all that true healing comes not just from medical expertise, but from genuine, boundless compassion. He then turned to Angela and presented her with an ornate set of keys. These are the keys to Angela's Hope Center, a place that will carry your name and your spirit of service for generations to come. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, cheering for a woman they recognized as a true local hero. With tears of joy in her eyes, Angela accepted the keys. She stepped up to the microphone, and her voice, once timid, was now strong and clear. "This is not just my honor," she said. "This belongs to everyone who has ever felt forgotten, overlooked, or undervalued. Together, we will heal not just bodies, but spirits." Derek stumbled backward from the television, his legs giving way beneath him. He collapsed into his worn-out armchair as the full, crushing magnitude of his loss hit him like a physical blow. The woman he had ridiculed, the woman he had diminished and discarded, was now being celebrated by an entire city. Through his small apartment window, he could see the Hope Center in the distance, its lights twinkling against the dusk, a beacon of everything he had carelessly thrown away. He couldn't stay away. That evening, drawn by some morbid curiosity, Derek found himself at the back of the ceremony crowd, hidden among the hundreds of attendees. He watched his former wife being honored, celebrated, and loved by people who saw her true worth. He had expected her to seek revenge, to rise in a way that would crush him, but instead of seeking revenge, she chose something far more powerful. As the celebration swirled around her, Angela's gaze swept over the crowd, and she spotted a familiar figure at the edge, partially hidden behind a pillar. It was Derek. His once proud shoulders were slumped in defeat. For a long moment, their eyes met across the distance. And in his, she saw something she had never seen before. Not arrogance, not anger, but genuine, profound remorse mixed with an ocean of loss. People were calling for more speeches. Cameras were flashing. But Angela's attention was fixed on the broken man who had once been her husband. She could have ignored him. She could have had security discreetly remove him. She could have savored this moment of ultimate vindication. Instead, she excused herself from the dignitaries and began to walk slowly through the crowd, making her way toward Derek. With each step, she felt the weight of 20 years of their life together, of dreams shared and then shattered, of love given and then rejected. Seeing her approach, Derek instinctively took a step back, shame flooding his face. He expected her to be angry, to unleash a righteous fury. He certainly expected the cold, cutting dismissal he had shown her so many times. "Angela, he began, his voice cracking. "I know I have no right to be here. I know I destroyed everything good we had." She stopped directly in front of him, her eyes studying his face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, genuine suffering. His expensive suits were gone too, replaced by simple, worn clothes that told the story of his fall. "You're right," Angela said, her voice quiet but firm. "You did destroy what we had. You took my love and threw it away. You took my sacrifices and mocked them. You took my dignity and crushed it in front of strangers." Tears began to fall freely down Derek's face. "I'm so sorry, Angela. I was wrong about everything. I was proud, selfish, and so cruel. You deserved so much better than what I gave you." The crowd behind them had quieted, sensing the drama unfolding. From the podium, Samuel Crane watched, his own heart racing, understanding he was witnessing a crucial, defining moment. Would Angela choose the revenge she so rightly deserved? "Derek," Angela said, her voice softening but still firm, "look at me." He slowly raised his eyes to meet hers, bracing himself for hatred or triumph. Instead, he found something that broke him completely: compassion. "I forgave you months ago," she said softly. "Not because you deserved it, but because holding on to all that anger was poisoning my own heart. God healed me the moment I decided to let it go." Before Derek could even respond, Angela stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him in an embrace. The gesture was so unexpected, so profoundly graceful, that the entire crowd fell into a stunned silence. This woman, who had every reason on earth to reject and humiliate her former husband, chose instead to offer him grace. Derek completely collapsed into her arms, sobbing like a child. "I'm so sorry," he whispered over and over again. "I'm so sorry for everything." "I know," Angela whispered back, holding him. "And now you can start healing too." Watching from the stage, Samuel Crane felt tears well up in his own eyes. This was the unconditional love his own mother had shown him. This was why his vast fortune had felt so empty until this very moment. He had finally witnessed true transformation, not through money, but through the incredible healing power of forgiveness. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the Angela's Hope Center, Angela walked toward her car. She had changed back into the simple blue dress she had worn on that terrible night at the dinner party. The dress Derek had mocked, the dress that had become a symbol of her humiliation. Now, as the evening breeze moved the fabric gently, it had become something else entirely, a symbol of redemption, of dignity restored, and of a love that conquers all. Samuel approached her one last time. "Angela, I have to ask, how did you find the strength to forgive him like that?" She smiled, her face radiant in the golden sunset light. "Because I learned that forgiveness isn't really about the other person. It's about freeing your own soul to love again. People can laugh at what they don't understand, but heaven always watches in silence, ready to lift up those who are humiliated with faith and dignity.